Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today's tech update, in which we will tell you all about browser journeys. This is us. I'm JP on the left here. I will do today's intro before handing you over to Steph, who will do the live action part of demonstrating what is available in the product today on this topic. So, what exactly are we going to discuss today? I'll do a quick refresher with you on what browser journeys or transactions are, why you'd want to use them, and I will briefly introduce all of the stuff that Steph will be showing you, so you have a bit of an outline of what to expect during the demos later on. I hope that sounds good to you, so let's start. So let's talk about browser journeys, also sometimes called user journeys, or as we traditionally call them in the Uptrends product, transactions. Browser journey is a script, a series of steps that tests some sort of important sequence, a click path, if you will, on your site or web application. Anything you feel is essential for your users and therefore important to keep an eye on, you want to capture in a browser journey. Once defined and tested, we will perform those steps in a real browser and will perform the exact actions that a human user would also do inside their browser to interact with your site. So this is the real thing, not a simulated process. And we typically perform your journeys close to where your users are, anywhere in the world, or perhaps even inside your network if you want to run browser journeys on a private check location that you have installed in your organization. And good to be aware that we always use the latest versions of our browsers, not some old version from last year. No, it's the latest and greatest, because with today's auto update mechanism in modern browsers, that's what your users will be using as well. So what do you get when you're running browser journeys? The more browser journeys you have set up to cover all of your use cases, the more you can rely on Uptrends to detect functional problems if something breaks. We'll get you performance numbers for each step in your scenarios, so you know where delays are happening in the complete chain. And we get you detailed information to zoom in on when you're troubleshooting. Is there an element slowing down on the page? What was visible on the screen before the user clicked that button, and so on. This is our recorder that lets you capture your scenarios in your own browser. It's a browser extension. It's easy to install on your own laptop. You record your script as you click through your web pages. It uploads your recorded script to the Uptrend system, which is where you will test and tweak until you're happy to start your monitoring. I'll briefly mention a series of new functions we've added over the last several months. We have more coverage for web applications that are protected by integrated security. Mostly this will be for web apps running inside your network, so we should be able to monitor anything running inside your firewall if you're running private checkpoints. And we can also monitor web apps protected by two-factor authentication. We can receive SMS-based login codes or generate codes similar to what mobile authenticator apps do. Next improvement is about capturing errors and information about what is happening inside web pages. We can capture warnings, errors, and messages from the browser console, allowing you to check for JavaScript errors and other events, such as page elements that are failing to load. We now also let you track popular page load metrics, such as Google's Core Web Vitals and W3C metrics, to get a real good sense for the performance of the pages that will hit during your browser journey on a detailed level. So for example, if we're on a page, how much wait time does a user experience between the last mouse click and the moment they can start interacting with the new page, that sort of thing. And then the ability to set error thresholds on those metrics so you get alerted when the performance drops below a certain level. And the final new feature we have in store for you today is called Film Strip, which is a series of screenshots for each individual step. So you can visually see the build up for each page as the page loads and the user starts interacting with it. So I hope that paints a bit of a picture of what you can expect today and that it got you curious and excited. So let's head over now to Steph, who will show you everything in action. Please take us in, Steph.
Thank you very much, JP. Hello, everybody, and thank you again for joining us. My name is Steph Hagen. I'm the lead support engineer at ITRS Uptrends, and today I'll be demonstrating Uptrends' transaction technology for you. I'll be creating a completely new recording using our transaction recorder plugin, which was described by JP earlier, as a reminder of how easy it is to set up a new transaction. I'll be going through various settings that are available to empower the transaction monitor beyond its normal performance and availability checking, and I'll be highlighting various new features you might not yet be familiar with. We're going to be taking a look at the results generated by a transaction monitor and the impact that these various settings have to the information that it can give to you. Finally, I'll be showing an example of a two-factor authentication setup in an actual transaction. It's worth noting that everything I will talk about today is documented in our knowledge base, which is freely available via uptrends.com in the Support Center under the Learn menu. If you have any interest in any of the features that will be highlighted, or if you would like more information in general, I highly recommend you check out our documentation or contact your sales representative or the support team. Without any further ado, let's get started. Currently looking at an Uptrends account with two monitors in it, so I'm going to be adding a new transaction monitor to these two. For this, I will open the Uptrends Transaction Recorder Chrome plugin, which you can find by searching for Uptrends in the Chrome Web Store or via links in our knowledge base or in the application itself. I already have it installed, so I can click and open it in the extensions menu. A screen opens that has some information about the transaction recording, and to start the actual recording, I'm going to click Start Recording. I'll get a few warnings about screen resolution, etc., so I'm going to click OK. And then, as you can see, a new browser window opens. In this window, the plugin will record all my actions to create a transaction script. My target website in this case will be galacticresorts.com, a testing website made and hosted by us just for demonstration purposes. Galactic Resorts lets its users book holidays on distant planets. Now, unfortunately, as you might imagine, it's not real. We don't actually offer interplanetary holidays. This is just for testing purposes only. That said, I will be making a booking for one of these locations, so I'm going to click Book Now on this middle one, for example. After clicking this, I end up on the following page, an in-between page with a little bit more information about the specific destination, so I have to click Book Now again. And then I end up at a form where I have to fill some information about myself to make the actual booking. Example, name, some address. There's no real backend. It doesn't really matter what I fill in here. So just for demonstration purposes, I'll leave it at this. I'm going to click the Save button to submit my booking, and the site responds with a text, "Your order has been confirmed." This is all I want to check. I want to check that this booking funnel works. So I think it's probably a good idea to end my transaction in checking that this text, "Your order has been confirmed," appears on the page so I can verify that the funnel was successfully run through. So I'll put this text on my clipboard, and in the recorder, first of all, we can see the steps that I've recorded just now. And at the bottom here, I can add a content check for the text, "Your order has been confirmed." I'll click Save to add the content check. And there we go. That's our recording for now. So I'm going to click Stop Recording. The recorder will give me an overview of the steps we've recorded. Navigate to galacticresorts.com, click Book Now again on that in-between page. We fill some stuff into a form, we click Save, and then we check that the textual order has been confirmed is present in the page content. I'm happy with the way this recording looks now, so I'm going to click Upload Recording. The recorder will ask me for some credentials. These are the normal credentials that you would use to log into the Uptrends app. Click Login, and now I have to give the transaction a name. Action demo. From here, I have two options. I can select I'll test and optimize this transaction by myself. Um, a good option for people who are maybe more comfortable with concepts like HTML, XPath, CSS, scripting in general. It's not very complicated scripting. There is a visual interface, but still you might be uncomfortable with these concepts, or you might just not have the time, in which case you can select the option to let the Uptrend support team stabilize the transaction for you, and then we'll make sure that your transaction runs correctly. For the purposes of this demo, however, I'll leave it on. I'll test and optimize the transaction by myself. I will click Start Upload. That will create the transaction monitor in my account. And I can navigate to it by clicking Go to my new transaction monitor. Opens in a new window. And I'll put it down here. So now we're looking at the steps editor of the newly created transaction, and we can see the steps that we have just recorded automatically subdivided into logical steps. Roughly, we see step 2, step 3 here. The base rule is roughly one step per new page loaded. So as you can see, the script is currently configured to navigate to galacticresorts.com, then perform a click action on the second link element that has text book now. That leads us to that in-between page where we have to click book now again. Then the transaction fills in some data into a form, clicks the save button, and finally it checks that your order has been confirmed as present on the page. So this would now be a working transaction. To demonstrate that, I'm going to click Test Now. My account defaults to the London checkpoint, so this check will take place from London. And I'll hit Test Now, and then we should start seeing the results come in one by one. There we go. We see the first step has already succeeded. Step 2 has succeeded. Step 3, and I'm sure the same will happen for Step 4. For each individual step, we provide detailed information for debugging purposes. So every step comes with a screenshot based on what the browser looked like at the end of the execution of that step, and a waterfall chart. We'll dive more into waterfall charts later on, but very useful tool for debugging purposes to check that what is slowing down the page effectively. So I have a completed test that is all okay. Every action is green, so this is now a functioning test, functioning script. Now, you may be familiar with this process so far, so we can dive into some more advanced settings, starting under the Advanced tab. There are several options here. First of all, we can change to mobile simulation using Chrome's built-in mobile simulation functionality. If you're testing a mobile website, it can be very useful to set this. It comes with bandwidth throttling if you want to check your connection, the connection to your website over 4G, simulated 4G, for example. You can do so here. I'll leave both on inactive for now. We can do URL blocking. If there is a certain page element that you do not want to be loaded over the course of a transaction script, for example, you're running an A/B test or some analytics software or mouseflow software that you don't want the transaction script running on your website to interfere with those results, you can block them from running. By default, we block Google Analytics, but if you have some example abtest.com domain running, you can block it from loading and effectively disable the A/B test for the purposes of this transaction. We have the authentication option. If your website requires, for example, basic authentication credentials, you can fill them in here. And you can specify manual HTTPS request headers, which may be necessary to correctly execute the result. So all of these options might be necessary configuration to set up your check as required. We also have options to improve the quality of the check itself. We can go back to the Steps tab in the editor and configure additional checks as part of each step here individually. So first of all, we can enable the waterfall, film strip, and page source for each step. We'll take a deeper look at the effect of these options later, but for now, the waterfall gives us a very detailed overview of the page load broken down per page element. We already looked at one just now. The film strip is a series of screenshots that show the page load progression over time. We are currently still rolling out the film strips feature for transactions. It is already available for full page check monitors, but for transactions, you may not yet see it in your account. It will be there shortly. The page source option means the HTML source and page load console log will be included in the monitor result, so we'll take a deeper look. Beyond these options, each step has an error conditions tab, in which we can configure advanced checks per step. So the check resource availability error condition is the default one. It means we'll return an error for the monitor if any of the actions in this step lead to a problem of any kind. Then there's the Core Web Vitals error condition. Core Web Vitals are Google's standardized set of page load metrics, which are an important way to measure user experience on the page, and they may affect Google's page speed ranking. So this can be very relevant for your SEO. You can configure your own thresholds. You can use the default thresholds as set by Google, or configure your own, customize them. Similar to the Google Core Web Vitals, there are the W3C metrics, which is another standardized set of page load metrics to represent user experience. For example, the well-known time to first byte is a W3C navigation metrics. You can configure threshold for each of these metrics, or you can use the standard given values. There's the check console content error condition, which allows you to check against the browser console from when this action was being executed. For example, if during the loading of the page during this step, some JavaScript is executed and that fails for whatever reason, it's likely that the browser will generate an error in its console, which you may want to check against. Or alternatively, page elements like images, for example, they may return 404 errors if they're not available, in which case the browser will likely also generate error messages in the console. So we can set up a check for a warning message that says JavaScript error, just as an example. And then finally, there is the check resources error condition. This error condition allows you to check things like if the total size of all elements matches a certain threshold, or if a certain percentage of page element fails to load. So we can set up a check that says, give an error if 10% or more of resources, individual elements for each page, fail to load correctly. So all that said, I will now enable the transaction by going to the main tab and switching it to production mode and hitting enabled. I'm hitting save. And then while we wait for the first monitor result to come in, that shouldn't take very long, but I would like to take a quick detour and talk about checkpoint selection. As you may be aware, Uptrends can monitor your website from an ever-expanding network of currently 233 locations worldwide. By default, all the checkpoints are selected, but by adjusting your selection, you can configure your monitor to check your website from where your end users are located. For example, if your users are primarily located in the UK, you can clear the existing selection and select UK only. So you'll get relevant data to where your end users are located. As mentioned, Uptrends monitors mostly from the outside in, so over the public internet via one of those checkpoints to your website, just like one of your end users would be doing. However, if you have resources that are not available over the public internet, but are instead available to an internal network only, you can deploy a private location inside your network and apply the exact same monitoring. So in this example, you can see that a private location was installed, two in fact, inside the network associated with this particular account. So these private locations are for the benefit of this account only. They can run the exact same monitoring. The setup works the same, but just for websites for URLs that are not publicly accessible. So if that's the case, deselect all monitors and then select the private locations here. For now, I'll select all locations and we'll go to the monitor log to take a look. I've opened the result of our transaction monitor here. We can see a breakdown of each step and the actions that are part of it. So navigation to galacticresorts.com, we clicked book now. We clicked book now on the second page, filled in some form data, hit save, and then checked that your order has been confirmed. The total runtime of this transaction in total was, in this case, just under a second and a half, 1.461 milliseconds. And then for each step, we can have the additional information that we've selected. So for example, in step one, I enabled the waterfall chart, the page source, and the film strip timeline screenshots. So we'll take a look at the waterfall. In this waterfall report, we can find the core web vitals as measured during the execution of this particular monitor check. This includes color marking based on the Google recommended values. So with our current monitor settings, if these values exceed certain thresholds, the monitor will return an error which can trigger alerts to the right teams within the organization. And then next to the core web vitals, we have the W3C navigation timings. I think we set a time to first byte error condition that it must be under 5 seconds, which is very extensive. It's just over half a second, so well within the margin that we've set in this particular case. And then there's the waterfall chart itself, which contains detailed information per individual page element, such as load times, source server, TLS information. We can, per element, expand it. So, for example, the first element is the base HTML document. We find out where it came from, the resolved IP address, how large was it, some TLS information. We have information on request and response headers, and all the same information on each of these elements. And then also, per element, a detailed breakdown of load times. So this can be super useful in identifying bottlenecks in the page load. One of these elements will start really standing out in terms of load time. So in addition to the waterfall chart, we have the page source HTML, which can be very valuable for debugging purposes. It's nothing else than the base HTML document for this particular page. We also have the console log. For this particular page, there is only one info entry that says liftoff. There were no errors, evidently, so all is well. And then we have the film strip finally, which is a display of the page load over time. As mentioned, this feature is currently still in progress, so the eventual UI might look slightly different, but roughly you can see the progression of the page load over time. So all of this put together gives us a lot more insight into the page load, what it looked like from a user perspective, expressed in numbers and images. And in this way, you can elevate your transaction monitoring to do more than just check the functioning of certain funnels on your website, and you can paint a much more complete picture of the performance of each page. Finally, I would like to take a brief moment to show an example setup of a transaction monitor configured to use two-factor authentication. This particular monitor, we'll take a look at the settings here, goes to a URL and it uses credentials to log in, but to log into this particular URL, the user will also need to provide a code, 6-digit code, as generated by an authenticator app on their phone, hence two-factor authentication. So if we look at this transaction script, we see it goes to galacticresorts.com/login. It fills in a username and a password and then clicks a submit button in action 2.3 here. That leads to the page where the user is expected to fill in the 6-digit code from their authenticator app. And what we have done in the script here is instead set it to fill in a generated one-time password. So in order to do this, we have in the account a vault, and in that vault is a vault item called a one-time password configuration. The one-time password configuration consists of a certain secret value, obviously hidden here, and some other options that have to do with the one-time password code being generated. How long is it valid for? How long does it need to be? And what's the algorithm used? Run time. So when it comes time to execute this step on the checkpoint, it will generate that code and fill it into the correct field. And then again, hit the submit button and finally check that the username has appeared to signify that the login was successful. So we can take a brief look at what that looks like in the monitor log. We see a navigation to galacticresorts.com/login, filled in a username, filled in a password, hit the submit button or the save button, and then we filled in a 6-digit code that was generated on the fly on the checkpoint itself, which is the correct one-time password, hit the submit button once again, and then we found the username listed on the page to signify that the login was successful. That is all for the Uptrends transaction demo now. I'll hand back over to JP to close out the webinar. So JP, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. That was really good. Thank you. Well, let's wrap up for today. If you're watching this but don't have an Uptrends account, feel free to sign up for a free trial account at uptrends.com/signup. If you do have an account, but you're having trouble accessing transactions for some reason, or if you have questions about any of the features we showed you today, do reach out to our support team by creating a support ticket or by using the live chat function. We're happy to help you get started with recording and testing. Also, as Steph mentioned briefly, we can even build or stabilize a transaction for you, no extra charge. Our support engineers are really good at this stuff and keen to make things work for you. All right, I hope you found this helpful. If you have comments or suggestions about this particular session, do let us know. We appreciate your feedback. Thanks again for joining. Have a great day.